Share of the tax. The tax was 15 on both the front and the back. The QET was 175 on both the front and the back. Where's the difference? The difference came in what each group paid. On side one, your consumer paid $10 and the producer paid $5. On side two, it was exactly flipped. Your producer paid 10 and your consumer paid 5. What was the difference between side 1 and side 2?
The slope of the demand curve.
What is it? The slope of the demand curve, or as Scotty said, the elasticity. Side 1 was an inelastic function, side 2 was elastic. On the inelastic function, what happened? Well, the firm was able to pass on more of the tax to the consumer, right? The consumer paid more on the inelastic side. On side 2, the good was elastic. Our consumers are real price responsive. The firm is not able to pass on as great a portion of the tax. They have to absorb a bigger chunk of it. So on side 2, the consumer only paid $5. So back to the original question that started all of this. There's an error on the board. What's the error? What's the error?
The assumed 45 degree.
Yep. I made a nice, pretty unitary demand curve. But in this case, majority of the tax is paid by the consumer. Producers are only paying a small share of it. So my error was assuming unitary functions. They weren't. In this case, the demand curve would be, in reality, steeper than the supply curve in relationship. I should have probably drew an inelastic function. Because we'll be able to see the difference in that. I'm going to clear this guy now that everyone's seen that. And see the difference if I do change the slope of my demand curve. So if I had a function that was really steep, we'll just still keep supply fairly unitary. I think that looks fairly unitary at least. So again, I can find my original PE and QE. And I'll make a parallel shift, which hopefully stayed fairly parallel. So I do have QE fall to QET as expected. Again, the law of demand is still going to hold. So we expect that this shift in the supply is going to drive price up, which causes Q to fall, but it only falls a small amount. In fact, actually, I think I started going less straight as I went down. So it only falls a small amount. Price, however, in the market jumps up considerably. So that now we see that area of consumer pay relative to producer pay of the tax, well, a lot more distinct. That distance in red represents now what our consumers are paying relative to what our producers pay. I'm going to have to come outside of it a little bit even. In green. So we definitely see the effect that elasticity is going to have on this function. I mean, clearly in this case now the consumer's paying a lot more. Effectively, the deadweight loss is a little different too. You'll notice that not only is the consumer paying a lot more, but the loss of deadweight, or the portion of deadweight loss that is tagged to consumers, also much bigger, as opposed to the portion that is tied to the firm. So again, we see the effect that elasticity has on the model and those areas just like what we saw before with price ceilings. And we're kind of treated kind of the same way. We did it kind of quickly. We saw it. We now can identify it very easily with the math, by looking at that PET minus PE relative to PE minus G. But that's probably as far as we're going to kind of go. Yeah.
So, is that just how it naturally occurs when a tax is added, or can producers manipulate that so that they pay less of the tax?
A little bit of both. To take the really cop-out answer to your question, a little bit of both, because first of all, the governments don't have a lot of incentive to put taxes on elastic products. Most of the time, they're gonna scale that tax. Remember we talked about an excise tax, ones you pay more with an inelastic. They're gonna scale the tax based on the elasticity. So fresh fruit is probably something that is very elastic in real life, right? It's real elastic. We're really price sensitive to fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. They do still have a tax imposed on them. It is an incredibly small tax. In most areas, they even waive some portions of it. So like if you go and get fruit, you don't even pay the full 7% Missouri state sales tax. You're paying about 1 or 2%, and that's it. So in that element of it, they kind of know that they're not going to overtax these elastic products. It won't generate enough revenue. People will drop out of the market too much. They won't get as much. Firms lose incentive to produce because they're absorbing more of the tax. And then if they stop production, the government gets zero. So they do tend to kind of sway more towards inelastic goods anyway. They try to say, well, let's put this on a product that we know is still going to be purchased. Firms are still going to have incentive to produce it. Yes, they're going to pass most of the tax on the consumer. So in that kind of element, it does kind of give us that both kind of view of it. In terms of the firms and their flexibility to adjust the tax, sometimes, depending on how inelastic the good is, sometimes they actually try to do it through voting. They seek to get reprieve through voting. A great example of that is Ameren. So Ameren has, it's an inelastic good, right? Well, they have a significant regulatory tax that they have to pay. So they actually went to consumers, because this is a little different again, because it's not exactly a per unit, but they manipulated it. They actually went to consumers and they let you guys vote on how they could spend that, fee that they have to pay. And one of the things that we voted on, actually in many states, but in Missouri, they said they came out and said, so hey, this money that we're being assessed, can we spend it on advertising for greener technologies? And it overwhelmingly passed in the state of Missouri. Overwhelming, because why? What did we see as voters? Oh, Ameren wants to spend money on green technology. Great, check, yeah. But that's not what they said. They said, can they, instead of paying out as large of a share of the tax to the government, can we take some of your money and put it towards advertising, not developing, but advertising for green technology? They manipulated the tax they were paid slightly, which is why, if you think about it, if you've ever seen everyone's seen a commercial for Ameren now at this point, right? They don't tell you to buy electricity. They're not like, oh my God, we've got this great, amazing thing. You're gonna love it. Electricity. You guys gotta look into it. No, they're saying, we're at Ameren. We're really trying to strive for a greener planet, which is why we're developing all of these other green technologies. You might someday drive a car powered by the sun. Probably won't be mated by us. They don't say that part. But you might. Actually, we voted to say, can that count towards their regulatory fee to develop green technology? We said, yes, the advertising is allowable. So that's what their commercials are. They're burning money instead of paying taxes. So there is some manipulation that's possible for an inelastic good. For an elastic good, there is not nearly as much. Advertising is probably still what their goal is, what they're still shooting for, to try to get that demand curve shifted to the right. Because, right, we had a test question on the effect advertising has on elasticity when demand shifts to the right. Remember that question? Everyone's like, what? We did? That was the math proof. That's what you were proving. It was just like homework question number 2, by the way, when demand shifted to the right, and I said, evaluate what happens to elasticity. So that's where that one was. that's probably what they're shooting for, is to try to reduce some of the elasticity, get it a little bit more inelastic to kind of be able to pass more of the tax on. So they do have some manipulation possibilities at least. So very good question. Okay, why don't we at least bang out a couple of quick definitions for our next section. We won't get into any of the math, but we can knock out 2 definitions at least. So now we're going into the next, what we call part on the syllabus. So when you see the syllabus, this is officially part 2 on consumer choice. And we go and we pick up that chapter 3-4 that we jumped a little bit. So, so that's where we're at, consumer choice. Anytime we talk about consumer choice, this idea of demand and surplus, someone asked it. I think it was you, Megan. You said, what scale do we use for consumer surplus? And I said, we kind of default to dollars. And that's not perfectly correct, because that's assuming that we're measuring happiness to consumers in dollars. Well, you may or may not be able to do that. Sometimes that's hard to put a value on. We do, however, have a variable that is meant to measure consumers' happiness or their surplus. We call it utility. Utility is the measure of welfare, satisfaction, or happiness. One derives from consuming some good. Again, the measure of welfare, satisfaction, or happiness, one derives from consuming some good. Like everything else so far this semester, we want to be able to model it graphically and mathematically, which means we need to develop equations to explain it. We call those utility functions. A utility function mathematically relates alternative bundles of goods such that if the utility of bundle A exceeds the utility of bundle B, then bundle A is preferred to bundle B. I'll repeat it. Utility function mathematically relates alternative bundles of goods such that if the utility of bundle A exceeds the utility of bundle B, then bundle A is preferred to bundle B. Okay, we actually have one more thing that I want to do in part 1, of the syllabus, that's going to require computers. I was thinking maybe Friday, but now I'm thinking probably Monday, just because I don't know if I'll have the time trying to get everything graded for you guys to write the data that I need. So on Monday of next week, if you could please bring your tablet, your laptop, just something that has Excel on it. So the Apple version is fine, but I don't know all the code commands. So just make sure you maybe have some kind of thing. Yeah, do you guys want points for those or not? Yes. Okay, then turn them in up here. And then don't forget, you can sign up for service stuff if you want to. Yeah. So turn in your little grid thing if you want points for